1, 2. Simkin. Who hates Simkin? She hates Simkin. He hates Simkin. I hate Simkin. You hate Simkin. She hates Simkin. We hate Simkin. Who hates Simkin? I hate Simkin. They hate Simkin.
Hello, everybody. This is Jonathan Simkin, the president of 604 Records, sitting in the boardroom in our headquarters in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. And you're here for another episode of I Hate Simkin. Trying to think if I like the name of that podcast. I liked it more before, and people are starting to like those t-shirts and buy them from our store. And at first I was excited. Then I sort of went, hold on a sec. It's a shirt that says they hate me. Is this something I should feel good about or something I should be very concerned about?
Any publicity is good publicity.
Do you think so? Okay. Yeah. My guest is Michael McCarty, who is coming to you from Pacific Palisades in California. Michael, thank you for doing this.
Hey, pleasure. I just want to say that I think you should continue the theme of I Hate Simkin and sort of take a cue from Conan O'Brien. You know, his Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and everybody at the beginning of their podcast, they say how they feel about being his friend. So with yours, you could say why your guest hates you.
That's true. I think that's not a bad point. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I usually do start the podcast with a little bit of a story about that. I mean, the name comes from Michael Kruger from Nickelback, because Nickelback used to play the MMVAs when that meant something, when that was one of the biggest shows in Canada.
Yeah. And
Nickelback played it for, I think, 5 or 6 years in a row. And Mike always wore the same t-shirt and it said, I hate Simkin. And I never understood why. I don't think he hates me. I was at his wedding and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm still their lawyer. I'm still Nickelback's lawyer, but for some reason, we all thought it was funny. And actually, Mike, there's 2 stories that revolve around Mike to do with I Hate Simkin. The other one was he was on an airplane when he lived in Hawaii. He was flying back to North America. And there was a guy, a music manager who I won't name, no need to embarrass people, but there was a music manager who you and I know. But anyway, he was on the plane and he came up to Mike. He said, hey, aren't you the guy in Nickelback? And Mike said, yeah. He said, so your lawyer's Jonathan Simkin? And he's like, yeah, I hate that guy. That guy's a And Mike said, yeah, he's an but he's our so yeah, I sort of have jokes about that. But I mean, the reason I thought it was a funny title also was that, I guess I was obsessing at the time about, why I'm a polarizing figure in the Canadian music business, which I appear to be.
Has nothing to do with your tweets.
Nothing to do. Okay, good. So we're eliminating that. But no, but I mean, to me, it's not so much like, hey, let's talk about Jonathan Simkin. It's more like, what is it about me and what does it say about the music business? That I do seem to. There's not a lot of people who are like, yeah, Simkin's okay. They either hate my guts or they think I'm great, and there's nothing in the middle. And I've always wondered sort of why that is. So we're not going to obsess about this, but I'd love to hear your theory. You've known me for so long. You've been in the business for so long, like me. So why is it? Like, what do you think it is about me that makes some people just recoil and other people, sort of, I don't know, embrace me?
Well, I used to hate you for a few years after you convinced one of the bands we published to sue us. And then eventually I got over it, but.
Who was going to sue you? Is it sad? I don't even remember what you're talking about. What does that say? I mean, I think all it says is I'm getting old.
Or it's which one?
I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we want to air that laundry, but had a brother and sister duo.
They never sued you?
Yes, they did. That's your suggestion.
Are you sure?
Yeah, well,
because I sued them. Everybody sued everybody. Because I sued them.
I think it was one of those. I think it was one of those. You're trying to convince them that the deal wasn't very good or something, and let's see if we can get out of it or get some leverage to renegotiate. And here's a few generic loopholes. Let's just sue them or threaten to. I'm pretty sure we got sued, but or maybe I just it was a threat to sue. I don't remember. But.
Okay. No. I hear. Listen, I've mellowed out over time. That I will tell you that. And it's funny. It's funny that I don't remember that, and kind of sad that I don't remember that. Although I do remember suing them. Okay. That's something I remember. Okay. And the reason why that one's kind of funny is, and we kissed and made up, and everything was fine. Like we're on good terms. But I had to sue them about something. It's public record, so I'm not revealing things that aren't, once something's a lawsuit, it's public record. Right. But, I had to serve them. I had to serve documents on them. And they were being a bit evasive about it. And I happened to find out that they were recording at, what's that studio, northern part of Toronto, famous studio, been there forever.
Phase One?
No, Rock Studio, Total Rock Studio. Oh, God, I'm having... It's a guy from a band who runs it. It's a guy from Triumph or something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Metalworks.
Thank you. So they were out there recording.
That's
and because I'm a lawyer and because I went to law school in Ontario and I knew a lot of lawyers there, I got a process server to dress up as a pizza delivery guy. And the statement of claim was in a pizza box. And they went to Metalworks and he said, like, yeah, but they're not going to be expecting pizza. I said, trust me, you ring that bell and you say there's a pizza delivery for you know who. And sure enough, he came down and opened the pizza box and there. And to his credit, the person in this band, to his credit, he texted me and was like, well done. That was good. And we settled and we kissed and made up and it was all good. So, well, that's interesting because I don't really think about, I don't think about that aspect of things but you're right. I mean, certainly in the early part of my career, because I didn't come from the music business, I fell into it by accident. I think I definitely had a tendency to substitute aggression for experience. Like when in doubt, scream and shout and threaten. Right. And I think there was a bit of that with me early on in my career. And I felt like such an outsider, I guess at that point I was like, I'm an outsider anyway. I'm just going to,
Well, listen, could come back to your original question. Why do you seem to be polarizing? You're somebody who utterly speaks his mind, very little filter. You have very strong, you have very strong opinions, and you're not shy to share them. You have zero tolerance for what you perceive it to be fools, and zero tolerance when you think you're being around with. So all that adds up to somebody who doesn't sit in the background.
I guess that's true. It's funny because I never think of myself that way. I'm just kind of speak my mind, like just sort of straightforward and honestly. But I think it's a business where that's not always something people want. People often just want you to say yes and smile and wave, as the old song went, And
also very strong advocate for your clients, which you should be. So,
yeah, true enough. So let's go back a little bit. Like, it's funny. I was making some notes and I was like, when did I first meet you? And I think, and I could be wrong, and I'm sure your memory might be better than mine. I think it was Matthew Goodband.
Yes, it was.
Because my memory, so here's my memory of it. I got hired. Frank Weipert brought me to Matt. Frank was Matt's original manager. And Frank brought me to Matt because I had been involved in the Lowest of the Low situation, which Frank also managed. And they were on a label that I repped. It was a small indie label in Vancouver, a startup, and they signed Lowest of the Low.
Oh, really?
And their lawyer was Graham Henderson, who, as you know, is, kind of legendary sort of entertainment lawyer in Canada. And at that time, I mean, I was just starting. I mean, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I'm the first to admit it. And the label and the band got into a pretty nasty dispute, like very early on, before they even made their first record. And so Graham did what he did. He advocated hard for his client, basically said, you were off the label. And I advocated back. And we ended up settling it in a way that was, I thought, quite positive for my client. And, I get a phone call from Frank Weipert, who says, like, well, I don't know who you are, but I want you on my team after what just happened with Graham. And I said, okay. And then he introduced me to Matt, and, the rest is history. But we were trying to get Matt a record deal, and we got close and couldn't do it. And, you had a relationship with Frank, I think, that was already pre-existing.
No, it was Barb Seaton.
Oh, who knew Frank?
Yeah, and also, what was Frank's sort of assistant or right-hand person? What was her name again? Oh, man, I can't believe
He had a few. Audra?
Audra, yeah, Audra. So I believe that Audra was the original champion for Matt inside Frank's office. And then it was either Frank made connection with Barb, or Audra did, or they both did. And it was Barb that brought it into our office, our team at EMI Publishing. Yeah.
Interesting. See, because at the time, and I still sort of feel this way, although less strongly, I was very leery of publishing deals. And the reason was simple. It's like, hey, if you can get a record deal first, then the value of your publishing is going to go up, and then you're smarter to do it in that order because, you have more market value. You have to make those decisions from time to time when you're, working with artists, because, even when you signed a deal at that point, it's like, well, my market value might have gone up, but if I put out a song and it's a hit, it's going to go up again. But if I put out a song and it flops, it's going to go down. So it's always hard to make those decisions. But at the time, I remember telling Matt and Frank, and it wasn't anything to do with you or anything to do with EMI where you were working at the time. It was just like, hey, let's try and get a record deal first. And if we can't, then then maybe let's look at the publishing thing. And we couldn't get a record deal. And then I think we went, okay, well then, you know what? We should have a conversation with Michael. And what I remember, and boy, it's funny. I mean, it's so long ago, but it doesn't seem that way. But what was so unique about you, I felt at the time, was that there weren't other publishers kind of doing what you were doing. People were signing stuff, but they were more just collecting money. And that's still the case with a lot of publishers where, look, you need somebody to collect the money. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's publishers who kind of are collection agents and collection agents only. And there's publishers that do a hell of a lot more and add value. And you were in that latter category because not only did you always have a good strategy and a plan, like I remember having calls with you where, we were planning out the next year. But it was also that you put your money where your mouth was. And it was like, I think we should make a record. And guess what? I'm going to pay for it. And that was Last of the Ghetto Astronauts.
Right.
So,
well, we were always I still am very artist development oriented. And for various cosmic reasons, I ended up not in the slipstream of the record company A&R doing that. I ended up in publishing, but my inclination, my interest, my passion was finding artists and writers at really early stages and helping them get from point A to point B. And one of the reasons why that is because my favorite way to hear music is out of the mouth of the original songwriter with whatever instrument they wrote it on and with no production and that kind of thing. And that's partly why I was in publishing. In the case of what you mentioned, get a record deal first and then maybe do a publishing deal. Well, that was certainly what I faced when I first started running EMI Publishing Canada in late 92. So I'd started in publishing in Canada and was fortunate enough to be transferred to LA for almost 6 years, mid 80s to early 90s, and then came back. And that's what everybody said to me. I always tell everybody, don't do a publishing deal or hang on to your publishing and that kind of thing. And eventually I managed to convince people by first rhetoric and then by demonstrating that we could actually do it, that you've got it backwards. Because arguably the most important company in an artist's career to get them off the ground is the record company. And which label you're with at what point in time and what their capability is and what their commitment to breaking you is really the thing that makes or breaks you in terms of whatever companies you ever want to work with. And so I thought what I said was, I'm going to reverse that slogan. Don't give up your record rights. And people said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you come with me to a publishing deal with me, we'll help develop you to the point where you can get the biggest, best record deal possibly. So you get, in the ideal world, you get all the choice in the world. You get to choose whoever you want to work with. You get great terms because we're going to bring you to the point where it's undeniable. And so when people, bought into that and we had success, it really just proved it. And Matt's a great example because, and back in those days, the object was to get somebody a record deal. These days, that's almost a laughable notion, but not entirely. But it's obviously quite different now. But then the big step up in your career was get a record deal, and then so I would say get the right record deal. So we thought of ourselves as we called ourselves Invisible Records because we acted like a little startup like an indie record company, even though we weren't a record company. All we involved with was the publishing, and so yes, we put up money to make records. We provide A&R advice, and then we had Bobby Gale, who was independent record promoter, who would promote our records and sometimes help get them pressed, and he would promote the videos to Much Music. And Bobby passed away tragically a few years ago in a car accident.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was really, really tragic. He was on the 401 coming back to Toronto or from London, I think, and ran out of gas. And I guess he was walking to the nearest gas station or nearest exit and got hit by a car.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Yeah, but Bobby was go ahead.
Just think, I used to call him the Crispin Glover of radio promotion because
what he was like.
He kind of had that vibe about him. He looked like a vampire version of Crispin Glover.
Oh, absolutely. But when he got wound up about a record, you couldn't stop him.
Yep.
And so so he promoted the record, and I remember with Matt, Barb had been talking about him, and we've been listening to stuff, and I can't remember if he was in my office or not. I picture him in my office right around the same time. But anyway, I remember listening to his demos, and he had a song called Alabama Motel Room, which to this day I think is an absolutely extraordinarily well-written song. And I went, wow, this guy is an unbelievable songwriter. And so that's one of the reasons why we decided to do it. And then, of course, we made the record. And then I can't remember all the steps, but it ended up on A&M with Alan Reed being the champion there, I think. Yeah.
Well, they came down to I can't remember if you were there that night, but Matt showcased for them at the Town Pump, the old Town Pump in Vancouver in Gastown. And Alan was there and a bunch of people from, it would have still been A&M then. It wouldn't have been, it's pre-merger.
Yeah. Polygram, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it was, it was a hell of a night. I mean, that band, although it's funny because when Frank Weipert called me, I think I said, I should check the band out. And he said, well, Matt's got a gig. And when I went and saw Matt play the first time, I don't even think it was with a band. Like he was still kind of a folky at that point. Like I saw him play at some little cafe on Robson Street. And I think he even had one of those Bob Dylan harmonica holders. Like it was a very, very different doors. And then there was the band that had the cello player. There was, what was her name? Judy. Like there was a few incarnations. I mean, they ended up becoming like a kick-ass rock band, but that took a while. Like that was a progression. I can't remember where you stepped in. I mean, certainly by Last of the Ghetto Astronauts, this was a rock band.
Well, I remember the cello. So we got involved at least at that point. It's almost like he was unsuccessfully resisting becoming a rock artist.
Right. That's right. So, but boy, when they were at their peak, I don't know if there was a better band in this country.
They were incredible. And then the videos they made were just mind blowing.
It's funny. Speaking of Frank, Matt let Frank go at a certain point, and before he had new management, I was a manager, just me and Christy, just briefly. Somebody had to make sure things were, not falling apart. And that was during the making of Apparitions, of the Apparitions video. And I remember having these conversations with, what was his name? The British guy, John Reed. So was he the president of A&M?
No, John was at Warner.
But then he came, when they merged, they brought him in to be the temporary.
Oh, I remember meeting or something. Yeah.
I remember meeting with him, I'm pretty sure at Victoria Park. So I think it was post-merger.
Okay. Yeah.
And, they were very concerned about the video. We had sort of gone ahead and made the video and they were very concerned about it. And, I was like, what's the problem? I said, well, the problem is there's no performance in it. None. And I said, yes. And well, all videos have performance in it. And I remember talking to Matt about it. And Matt said that like, this video stays the way it is. I'm not adding performance stuff into it. And I kind of learned an important lesson in that one, which was, artists tend to know their audience better than record company weasels like me. No, not everybody has a strong sense of their audience, but Matt always did. He always had a strong sense of what was going to react. And hey, he was so goddamn right on that one. I mean, that video was massive and in some ways kind of made him in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And it's funny you talk about that because, in the golden era, if you want to call it that, of videos driving everything in the music business, I started to see how the process unfolded in the making of videos, in the green lighting of them, in the making of them. And I thought it was really destructive to the creative process because you remember the treatments, right? So what happened was whenever an artist signed to a major anyway, went to make a video, the A&R department would put out the call to the video directing and production industry to send some treatments in. So you'd get these written 1-2 page briefs about what the plan was. And remember the famous Frank Zappa quote, writing about music is like dancing about architecture.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's because I remember seeing some of these treatments and I went, these are complete. No wonder the videos are terrible when they start out with such a stupid process and you get the job because you've written something on paper that the A&R person happens to, latch onto. It's got nothing to do with the language of film. And so, I think, when people like Matt had free reign, they bypassed I'm sure he didn't do a treatment for it. They just bypassed the whole process and and way better videos were made because of that.
Well, he had that guy, Bill, what was Bill's last name? Oh God, who was kind of his video muse.
Yeah.
Bill made all those videos on the first and the second album.
Yeah.
Or actually not first and second. By that, I mean, the first major label album and the second major label album, starting with Everything's Automatic. And, it's going to kill me that I can't remember that guy's name. But, that happens sometimes. Like an artist finds kind of a muse of a video director.
Yeah,
and then they just get into a weird groove and boom. Because, I mean, everything on that album and the following album that the two of them made together was incredible. And that's when video had the ability to really kind of break a band, which I guess that's still there. It's just not there on Much Music or MTV. It's there on YouTube.
On TikTok and YouTube, yeah.
Or on TikTok, yeah.
One last comment on the treatment thing is I forgot to say that I used to say to when I was trying to convince people, it was fairly easy to convince the artist to say, yeah, the treatments, but it was harder to convince the label, right? But I used to say to people, what if you made somebody write a treatment for the writing of a song? And the artist comes into the A&R office and they hand a piece of paper over the A&R person, said, it's going to be a sad song. it's going to feature a breakup, that kind of thing. Like, it's just antithetical to the way you create. And, another incredible video of artists we had in common that we may or may not have mentioned earlier was the Len video for Steal My Sunshine. And, again, that was a case of bypassing the treatment. And one of the reasons why they got signed to that Sony label, the Work Group, was because Jeff Aroff, the head of the label, was an ex-video guy. And he saw those low-budget videos that Mark Costanzo made that were absolute genius. I mean, that was the reason why we signed them, was because the videos were genius. They were low budget. They were incredibly entertaining. And they showed an incredible grasp of youth culture and how to
100%
put youth culture on the screen, and then melodies were incredible. So anyway, this is to me a famous story, but not many people know. But so they got signed, and they go to make the record, to make the video, and of course, in those days, every major label in the U.S. anyway had a video department with the head of the video department, who saw themselves as the people who were going to oversee it and perhaps choose the treatment and whatever. So this guy was told by J.R. Faroff, there's going to be no treatment. And the budget's, X $100,000, and talk to Mark. So the guy talks to Mark and he says, well, what's the plan? And well, we're going to take a dozen of my friends to Daytona, party for a few days and film it. And the guy was apoplectic, and he would complain to Aroff, and Aroff said, no, just trust him. So they go to Daytona. And of course the video starts with them in the airport, having fun in the airport. And, the legend has it that, they got to Daytona, and that night they had a wild party in the hotel, and they're all hungover. And the next morning, the film crew is waiting at, 9 a.m. call or whatever it was. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, the band emerges, wiping the eyes, the sun out of their eyes, and that. They go, jet skis, are those jet skis? Let's go have fun on the jet skis and film it. So they had to scramble and figure out a way to, put a camera on a jet ski. And then that night, same thing, Party Central. Next morning, same thing. They're late. They come out. Are those scooters? Hey, let's go film us on scooters. And so that was the extent of the planning. And then the video guy from the work group was, metaphorically hiding in the bushes with his cell phone, phoning Aroff and going, jet skis, they're wasting our money on jet skis. Next day, scooters, they're wasting our money on scooters. This is a disaster. And then, of course, it all came together in the editing room, and it ended up being exactly what Mark said it was going to be. And it was an incredible video, and it made them huge.
And I have so much to add to this story because, of course, I was pretty involved at that point. Yeah. So a couple of things. First off, my first encounter with Mark was, I believe was email even around there? It might not have been email. It might have been a phone call. It was a phone call. I was in my first office ever, a tiny little office, $150 a month in the Dominion building. Yeah. And Mark called me. He said, hey, I'm in a band in Toronto. This is Jonathan Simkin. I said, yeah. I'm in a band in Toronto. I said, okay, great. He said, I want you to be my lawyer. I said, okay, why? And he said, are you the guy suing Sarah McLachlan? I said, yeah, that's why. I want you to be my lawyer. I never understood the link. I don't think he had anything against Sarah. I think he just thought it was ballsy. Yeah. And, he wanted somebody with balls sort of representing him. Yeah. And he said, we're going to send you a package. Like, what's your address? So I gave him my address. And what did they send? They sent those videos. They sent Candy Pop. Yeah. And the funny thing about Candy Pop, if you look at Candy Pop and then you look at Steal My Sunshine, they're the same video. Yeah. Except one's got a $300,000 budget and one's got a $3,000 budget. Yeah. It's a bunch of their buddies hanging out, having fun, playing sports. In the case of Candy Pop, it was skiing. In the case of Steal My Sunshine, it was jet skis and stuff. And but in many ways, it's the same video. Yeah. Even featuring people who would later become famous. And Candy Pop, I think Buck 65's in that one, and so is Brendan Koenig, who ended up in Broken Social Scene. Yeah, absolutely. But I saw that Candy Pop video. I still have it, the VHS that Mark sent me 30 years ago. And I was sold. The second I saw the video, I'm like, oh my God, the song's amazing. It's everything you said, but it's also the fact that he had a real knack for making you'd watch it and kind of go, man, there's a scene going on that I'm not part of and I want to be part of. Yes. And to some degree with Mark, it was true. Like there was a scene. He did have all these buddies around him. That's why Lan at times had 10 people, because it was like, it was this revolving cast of people who'd kind of come in and out. But I remember seeing that video and going, holy I want to know these people. I want to go party with these people. Like Mark was really a genius in that way. Absolutely. And I have a slightly different take on the work group video, but it's pretty much the same. I was on a conference call. I wonder if you were on it. God, it's so long ago. I was on a conference call. It was me, their then manager, Graham, the video dude from work group. I think Jeff was on the call. They might have even been in LA in the boardroom, and for some reason they wanted me on the call.
Right.
And Mark's like, yeah, we're going to fly a bunch of our friends to Florida. And they're like, yeah. And then, so what happens in a video? And Mark's like, well, that's it. That's what happens in a video. And everybody's like, but that song was such a monster and it was really blowing up. I don't think anybody wanted to fight him on it. And,
well, I think also too that Jeff understood that he had made these other low budget videos that were really good. I remember vividly that he had been attracted to that talent when they signed them. Yeah. So I think he probably just had faith, I guess. I don't know. But I
was just going to say, I mean, you know, you had already been in the business for a while. You had some big successes. I know you're involved with Wilson Phillips and involved, you know, for me, Steal My Sunshine absolutely was the first success I had that exceeded the borders of Canada. Because that song, my God, if I recall correctly, it was the third most played song in the world that year. I think it was 98.
Wow.
And, you know, there were so many things about it that were so interesting. For example, that album had, I think, 60 samples. Like every single song had a gazillion samples. Yeah. And there was no standard protocol for that stuff back then.
Right.
So I had to clear, I mean, it was insane. I was trying to clear samples from record companies that went bankrupt in 1926. Like it was, and some stuff never got cleared because there was simply we did all the due diligence. There was just no way of clearing them. Or we determined they were public domain or you know, whatever it was. But you remember who the sample was for Steal My Sunshine, right?
Well, it was more of the Andrew True Connection, and it was an EMI copyright.
And if this had been today that this happened, Mark would not have gotten the favorable split that he got.
Yeah.
It's just that back then it was the wild, wild west. It was just about, I remember negotiating hard about it. Yeah. And because at the time, it seemed to me that we should be getting more. You know, like I was like, hey, like big deal. So, but now, of course, and especially if you isolate the bridge, the instrumental bridge from More, it becomes so obvious just how, I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways, that's Steal My Sunshine.
Well, yeah, and that's the beauty of sampling, and it's like a great example of a great sample, a great use of a sample, and that becomes something totally different, but still has the spirit and vibe of the original. But that song, a couple of things about that. One, the band. Well, I'll say the other thing first, and I'll talk about it. So that song, as you probably know, and I talk to Mark about all the time about this. The amount of licenses that song has had in the last 3, 4, 5 years is astounding, and it speaks to it's proof of the enduring nature of music. And you know, I'm in the catalog buying business now, amongst other parts of publishing. And you know, when we're explaining to potential investors how the whole thing works, they're astounded that songs, once they've got their, what we say is once a song gets its hooks in culture, it never leaves. And this is a fantastic example. And also, there's a cycle. Very predictable cycle. Somewhere 20-ish years from the original release, there's a bump because of the dynamics of the original demographics of the listeners of the song, right?
And I've just had that with Call Me Maybe. Yeah, you know, because I mean, Call Me Maybe is another one of those ones like Steal My Sunshine. I mean, it's just so evergreen, and and it's always done well. It never really has stopped. The truth is, but at the 10-year mark, suddenly it was sentimental.
Yeah.
So suddenly people are making movies, and it's like, hey, let's get Call Me Maybe. Like they're making movies about the early, 2010s.
Right.
And, that's the go-to song. I mean, we've had more action on that song in the last year than we probably had in the preceding, let's say, 3 years. Even though, again, it's always been at a pretty steady clip. But like in the last year, we had 2 Extra gum commercials. Like that, the company that owns Extra also owns Orbit. They used it for an Orbit gum ad. They used it for an Extra gum ad. Yeah. They used it for a Malibu booze commercial.
Wow.
They used it. Will Ferrell's new movie has it. We just licensed it for a Netflix film. And I can honestly say that not a single day goes by where there is not at least one email about that song.
Yeah.
Which is insane. It's 11 years ago. And I mean, here I am sitting in our headquarters in Vancouver, which in a lot of ways is the house that Call Me Maybe built.
And it was, I think, the biggest song in the world that year, wasn't it?
biggest song in the world. And I think it sort of goes back and forth, but it's definitely, if not still, the biggest selling digital single when you include downloads, because it sort of caught the tail end of the download market. The downloads alone, I think, were something like 30 million. Like I've got a diamond plaque in my office for that one from the US. It's insane. It's
weird to call the download era the old days, isn't it? But it is.
Yeah.
Well, but see, it's incredible copyright. I mean, and it is one of the primary iconic elements of that era. It stands for that era, right? And to a lot of people because it was so big.
Hard to believe. I mean, we've both been, I'm not going to say lucky, because I think we're both good at our jobs and have been good at A&R. Like, that's another thing I always thought about you, like a similarity I thought was, anybody could have heard Call Me Maybe and said, hey, I think that's a hit. But I signed Carly 6 years before Call Me Maybe. Yeah. The real key, I think, to good A&R is obviously seeing what an artist is, but also seeing what they're going to be, or seeing what they have the potential to be. Like, because Carly dropped, like the first time I met Carly, it was with her dad, and she had just come off a Canadian Idol. And if I remember correctly, she was a fan of Mariana's Trench. And so that's why she wanted the meeting. She was looking for management. And I remember sort of having the meeting and kind of going, man, there's a lot to like about her. She's intelligent, and she's bubbly, and she's gregarious, and she's intelligent, and she's cute. She's cute as a button. But I remember saying to her, I said, I really like working with people who write, because I assumed she was coming off the Canadian Idol franchise and she probably wasn't a writer. Right. And I'll never forget, she kind of looked me right in the eye, almost defiantly. I do write. And I said, okay. She said, in fact, I'm going to drop a CD off to your office tomorrow. And she did. I still have it somewhere. And it was most of the songs, or at least the beginning of most of the songs that were on Tug of War, her first album. Mm-hmm. And that was it. When I heard the songs, I'm like, okay, I'm in, I'm sold.
That's great.
And that's how that one sort of started. But I mean, I have a lot of acts like that. I mean, I felt that way about Nickelback. I mean, they played me that first EP, Hesher. I mean, were there any hits on there? No. But you know what? I heard it and kind of went, man, the writing is so strong. It's just a matter of time. Like they're going to nail it. And even Coleman Hell. I mean, I signed Coleman Hell 5 years before Two Heads. Same sort of thing. It's like the level of talent is so high that, okay, maybe I don't hear the single here. It's going to come. It's just a matter of time.
Well, we've talked about this before. I think, not even arguably, you have the best A&R track record in the history of the country. In the sense that all those artists you're talking about, you were way more than a lawyer. You were a talent finder. And when you first got and you had the reaction to them that you just described, and the belief that you just described, and you did what you did, either as a lawyer or a label owner or a manager, to get them from point A to point B. But you had, you saw some ingredients, and you could foresee the result of those ingredients mixing properly, right?
So where's my Walt Grealis? God damn it!
Yeah, well, we have to lobby for that.
Good luck. But there's probably other people I forgot I sued out there who don't. Maybe we should change the in honor of you. We could change the name of the podcast to "I Hated Simkin."
That's hilarious. But you talk about, like, those spotting those elements that you don't hear the hit yet necessarily, but you spot the elements. So with Len, it was, first of all, it was Mark DiPietro who turned us on to them. And when he brought them in the office, the very first thing was you felt that there was a 2-person gang. Like the two of them together were had so much attitude and swagger that you literally thought they were a street gang. And so that was my first reaction. The second reaction was about the music and the creativity, like I said earlier. And to me, that was a great combination. So, and then hilariously, you talk about things that turn you on, they actually turn other people off, or they don't see them. So I got, once word got out that we had signed the band, I got a call from virtually every A&R person in Toronto and Canada and said, I heard you just signed Lynn. And I said, yeah, why? And they said, I kicked those mother out of my office.
Yeah, I guess Mark's another polarizing guy. I guess there's a few of us kicking around.
Well, I also think someone was method to the madness. I think they wanted to test to see if you were classic music industry idiot, or if you would give them the space to be them, you know?
That's really interesting. I mean, you know, the other thing I was thinking, which makes me laugh, is we were talking about Candy Pop versus Steal My Sunshine. The other element that's in both of those videos really strongly is, you know, they were always sort of, I think consciously, they would never own up to it, kind of pushing the, if you're brother and sister, why do you look like you're like somehow sexual with each other? Because that comes up for sure in Steal My Sunshine. But if you go to Candy Pop, there's a scene, I haven't seen that video in probably years, but I remember it so clearly. There's that scene where they're both in the back of a car. It's like a hatchback. Yeah. And so the hatchback's up and they're in the back of the car, kind of squirming around in the back seat. And they almost look like they're going to kiss. Yeah. There's a moment where their faces kind of get very close to each other. Yeah. And I used to have that question. I always thought it was a stroke of genius because, man, people wanted to know, like, what's going on between the brother and sister there? Right. And I'd always play along like, hey, man, I don't know. Like, I don't get involved in that, you know? But it was part of the intrigue of that band, at least early on. Yeah, it was provocative. I don't know. I don't know if they've never, owned up to being on purpose to me, but I could see your angle. But either way, it was provocative and intriguing, as you said, and there was just something subliminal about it that was another element to the band, and it got people talking, you know, which is it got people talking. Yeah, but ultimately, it was the song that did it. I mean, as is always the case, you know, and people always forget that it's still about the song, and that song is a monster. I think that they deserved better. I wish they had sort of sustained that. I think they deserve to sustain that. I agree. I think there were other hits. But you know, there is no. People talk about one-hit wonders, in a derogatory fashion. I think there's absolutely no shame in being a one-hit wonder. You reach the top of Mount Everest once, and billions of people, try and do that, and very few achieve it, and you did it. I sometimes wonder if it's worse to have one hit or no hits, because for some people, they get a taste of that. They get a taste of what that's like at the top of Everest. And boy, it's hard to ever kind of get back to normal again. Well, it depends on how they handle it, I guess. But you talk about Everest. So, it's long bothered me and frustrated me how the general public, especially even people in the industry, but especially the general public, trivialize pop songs, pop writing. And by pop, I don't mean like fluffy music. I mean popular music. And they just think it sounds simple and easy. And a lot of times when writers or artists are interviewed about their biggest hits, they'll say, I wrote it in 5 minutes. I felt like I didn't really write it, and I felt like it was, an antenna. I was like an antenna for it, kind of thing. And so it just sounds like you don't really work at it. But we know that the opposite is true. It's kind of like, my best analogies would be, say, golf, right? So first of all, there's only 125 golfers in the world, on the PGA Tour. What do they do most of the time? They hit millions of balls on the range, thinking very mechanically about their swings and getting measured and looking at it scientifically. But when they're in the middle of a tour, of a tournament, their job is to forget about all that stuff and play by feel. But playing by feel has been informed by the years of practice and thinking about it. It's the same thing with songwriting, I think. Yeah, that's why I always say that too. I mean, I've always said, when people ask me, like, what do you think why are some people so good at it? And I say, I think it's a combination of innate talent and craft. Yeah. In other words, working at it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And practicing every song you write that's not a good song is a practice. And people, so people are really don't respect that goes into that. And also the emotional side of it, the constant rejection, I mean, even once you're successful, now you're playing your new song for
your producer, your A&R person, your publisher, your manager, whatever. They go, oh, it's okay, and then you're wounded again, But anyway, so I thought, okay, what is some human endeavor that's universally considered to be difficult and nobody could ever question as difficult? And I want to try and use that as an analogy or compare that to songwriting. So I thought, climbing Mount Everest. Let me go do the research, because nobody could say that that's an easy thing to do. And you can't say anybody ever ended up at the top of Mount Everest by accident. So I did the research, and every year, way more people reach the top of Mount Everest than people reach the top of the Billboard Hot 100. All the creative participants considered, artist, writer, producer, they add up to fewer people than reach the top of Mount Everest. That's how difficult it is to have a big hit song. And so, I really admire people, who can do it. And I unbelievably admire people who can do it repeatedly.
Yeah, it was just like, Chad. I mean, Chad, it's crazy that here we are. Well, I've been with him 30 years. I mean, and it's other than the first 5 where nobody gave a shit, for the last 25, it's been pretty high level of success. That's been sustained. You guys passed on them, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Well, the 2 biggest mistakes I've ever made in my career were passing on Drake and Nickelback. Although I didn't pass on Nickelback, I did for a long time, and then I woke up too late. And that was Barbara Seaton, my A&R person,
she came out to Vancouver. I remember being at Granville Island with the Nickelback guys and her. So I'm not sure why it didn't end up sort of going. I can't remember why you didn't sign them.
Well, I'll tell you why. So Barb was ecstatic about them and insistent about them, and I developed a rule in my head that if Barb came in my office with a certain look on her face, that it didn't matter what I thought about it, I should just sign it. And I forgot about it. And I forgot about it in this case. And so she played me the very first record, I guess, or there was demos of the first record. And I thought it was good, but it was like a derivative of Creed, which is a derivative of, whatever. And I thought, does the world really need a third generation derivative of that? And like all the classic music industry stupid excuses, right? And then she took me to see them play. I didn't think they were very good live at that point. They've obviously gotten great live, but at that point, I didn't think they were anything special live. Yep. And I just kept resisting. And then one day, she came in she called me in her office and she said, "Hey, here's a new Nickelback song." And she played me "Leader of Men." And I said, "Wow, what a great song." And she looked at me and she said, "Isn't that enough? We're music publishers." And I said, "You're absolutely right. What an idiot I am." And I got on the phone and called, I think we called Brian Coleman.
Yep.
And we said, I get it. We're in. He said, "Too late. We've decided that we don't want to sign a publishing deal in Canada." So I thought, okay, so my next obligation was to try and get somebody in my U.S. office into it. So we sent it to got the L.A. office on it, and they made an offer, but got outbid by Warner Chappell.
Yeah, isn't that something? Well, listen, everybody in this business has passed on stuff that, luckily I don't have too many of those. You don't have too many of those, but everybo's got some. Yeah,
well, the Drake thing, I'll tell you the Drake story in a second, but we talk about the A&R, gut and and seeing the early elements and that. It's basically, in the movie industry they call it green lighting. Like when you sign somebody, or when you okay a movie to be made, it's called green lighting. And I take a broader interpretation of that. And like if you sign somebody to a record deal, publishing deal, management deal, or if you green light a record or whatever, I call it green lighting. And I study that my whole life because that's basically what I've done for my career. And that's what you do. You make these decisions, these creative decisions to work with somebody and to invest money in them, time and effort and everything. So I'm fascinated by the whole greenlighting phenomena, and there's a couple of greenlight stories that have I think are really illustrative of how it really works and how I don't think you can ever boil it down to data. Although I think data is valuable, but at the end, it comes to a gut interpretation of the data. So first one would be a movie story. So and that was the greenlighting of Star Wars. So George Lucas was a famous film student at UCLA. He was famous as a student. because he made that THX-11
Right.
student film that attracted the attention of Francis Ford Coppola and a bunch of other people. And Coppola came in and said, okay, you're graduating. I want to mentor you. You know, you want to make what's your first movie? What do you want to do? I'll help you get financing. So he made his first movie, and it was American Graffiti.
Right.
Which turned out to be the most successful movie in American history in terms of profitability. And until Blair Witch Project came along. And because it was a dirt cheap movie and it was a huge success. And we could get on a tangent as to the anthropological elements underneath it, but don't have to do that right now. But so anyway, that was an enormous success. And then for his next movie, he decided to do Star Wars. And so he shopped it all around Hollywood, and everybody turned him down. And and from a distance, you go, what the hell? Why would you turn down the guy who made American Graffiti, for God's sake? Anyway, everybody turned him down. And finally, his agent said, well, there's one place left at 20th Century Fox, and it was like the bottom of the barrel. It was practically out of business, and it was a laughingstock studio. And he said, I'm not going there. And the guy said, well, what do you got? Nothing to lose. Nobody else wants it. So, okay, I'll go there. So he goes and he had a big pitch. He had drawings of everything, and he had models of the ships, and he had a drawing of the Ewok and stuff. And with the models of the ships, he did the pretend dog fights, and in his hands and that. And it was quite a physical presentation. At the end of it, he kind of sits down exhausted and said, well, what do you think? And Alan Jr. says, I haven't got a clue, but you're the guy who made American Graffiti, and that's good enough for me. And made the movie, and in a perverse example of how there's no justice in the entertainment business. I think the budget was $9 million or something, and they got way into it, and Lucas decided he needed $3 million more to finish it, and he wanted $3 million more from the studio, and Alan Jr. went to the board, and they refused to give it to him. So what did he do? He gave him back the merch rights so he could go sell the merch rights and to finish the movie. Otherwise, the movie wouldn't have got finished. And then when it became such a huge success, the board fired him for not having the merch rights.
Yeah. But wow.
And the other green light type story I have, which was the most, to me, I still get the chills when I think about it. I had the incredible opportunity to meet George Martin a few years ago. He was, of course, the guy who discovered and produced the Beatles.
Yep.
And the Beatles wouldn't have been the Beatles if it wasn't for him. And I said, listen, I've read every single thing you've ever said in an interview about, the discovery of the Beatles and why you wanted to work with them in the early days. I said, but I got to know, talking in front of you now, what was going on in your head, your heart, and your gut the moment you made that decision. And his answer was, my first reaction to them was they were a pretty crappy band. My second reaction was there was no evidence they could write songs. But my third reaction was when they walked in the room together, they had so much overwhelming charisma. I felt like they changed the molecules in the room.
And you know what? That's a lot like my Nickelback story, because they came to see me for a management contract. Mm-hmm. I didn't know who the hell they were. They hadn't done anything. And Chad walked into my office. They sat down, and he put his feet up on my desk. Which is a pretty weird thing to do when you don't know a guy and it's the first thing. And I kind of snickered, and I kind of said, dude, take your feet off my desk. It's like, oh, sorry. We have our meeting. And I remember they gave me a CD, and I still have that too. I keep all those old CDs. Thank God. One day it'll be the eBay college fund for my kids. But, I walked into, my wife, of course, Jennifer, who's a lawyer as well. And I walked into her office with this CD. And I said, man, I hope it's good, because there is something about that guy. I knew right from that moment of meeting him that there was something special about him. You were talking about data earlier, which is interesting because, of course, when you and I started, people got signed just because somebody believed that they had a good song or that they were talented. That's very rare now. It's not rare here. That's still how I sign people. I sign people based on a gut feeling. I care about the data, but I don't obsess about it.
Right.
This is kind of a oversimplified sort of question, but Do you prefer the way it works now, all this stuff, or do you prefer the way it worked when we first started?
I don't really think about it that way. I just think about it, well, this is the way it is. And, I try not to pine for the old days. Otherwise, you're going to, just sit around and be a person who pines for the old days.
Yeah. But it's funny, isn't it? Because, you think about it, when I started 604 with Chad, like, we always did things exactly the same way because everybody did things the exact same way. You would make an entire album. You didn't just go with one song. You made an entire album. You often spent a lot of money making an entire album. Then you would pick a single and make a usually really expensive video because back then, number one, the business was so much healthier. The CDs things were just driving, pushing billions of dollars into these companies' bank accounts. Yeah. And, but, if you remember in the early days of Much Music, there was maybe 8 video directors who kind of monopolized it. It was like the same 8 directors. And if you wanted to use one of them, you were spending $75,000 to $100,000. And that was it. We were making that first Theory of a Dead Man video, which was the first video we ever made as a company. I think it was $100,000, which I look back on it now and go, Jesus Christ, like what the hell was I thinking? But you sort of didn't have a choice at the time. Then you would put the single out, cross your fingers. Did it work? Oh, it didn't work. Next, it's pretty wild. Like, I think I prefer the way it works now because, you go song by song, single by single, and every single time is a new opportunity. You're not, how many bands got dumped on their first album, on their first single? Yeah. There's all the hype and then the single doesn't work out and everybody's all the momentum goes and it just kind of deflates right in front of you. Like, I think about Mariana's Trench, that first album did not work. At least it didn't work at radio. It was very much the videos that drove that first album. But if they had been on a major label, they would have gotten dumped.
Yeah, well, in the good old days of the 60s and maybe into the 70s, in American record labels, especially labels like Warner Brothers, you had 3 chances. So they would let an artist develop over 3 albums. And if the third album stiffed, you're off the label. But you had those 3 chances to develop. But I think, to answer your question at a super simple high level, I probably like it better now because I think I often say that this is the greatest era ever to be starting out being a wannabe artist or a music creator because you have the technology in your phone that's more than $1 million studio 20 years ago. You have all the technology in the world. You get it directly to the public, and nobody stops you. Nobody tells you can't do it. Now, there's downsides to that. One of them is that there was something about the struggle before that maybe made your music better. And of course, there's so much noise out there. Everybody in the world can do it like you, and they are doing it. And there's an incredible amount of noise. So you have to be great, but you always had to be great. You just have to be a different kind of great. Yeah. And if you and you have another asset, you have the world's history of knowledge of music technology, and the music business at your fingertips through Google. So it's kind of like athletics. Go look at, 20-year-old videos of your favorite professional sport, and you'd be astounded how slow they are and how small they are. And so those athletes today are standing on the shoulders, metaphorically, of the previous generations. They got more resources. They got technology, nutrition, scientists. A guy like Steph Curry, who willed himself to be the greatest three-point shooter in basketball, turned himself into a one-man industry. He spent millions of dollars hiring people, kinesiologists and engineers and nutritionists and doctors. And what's the most efficient way for the human arm to throw a three-pointer and all this stuff, right? So you can do that, and you have all the same kind of resources. The other thing that is good about now is that it's maybe what you're sort of alluding to too, is that it frees you from the tyranny of what became, by the, let's say, certainly by the 90s, probably by the mid 80s, the tyranny of the album touring cycle. Yeah. So once international touring became such a big deal, and most people alive today don't even know or remember when there was a time that wasn't a big deal. Here's what would happen. You make a record. Well, let's look at the cycle. You form a band in your garage. You struggle, you make demos, you mix and match new members, and along comes Jonathan Simkin and gets you a record deal, and now you make a record. That might be 3 to 5 years. And maybe one of your key songs is one you wrote 3 years before that. and then the record comes out and you go on tour, and you go initially on tour with a deficit financing from the record label, tour support, in terms of tour support. But if you're lucky, you have a hit, it takes off, and now you start to get real gigs, and you'll tour for 2 years. And then you come off the road, you're spiritually, mentally, and physically exhausted, and you're expected to write and record your next record. And this goes on, and this repeats over and over again. And if you're really lucky, you made a good second record, and you do have a rest of your career. So in the golden age of the record business, which I think a lot of people think it was arguably like simplistically from the Beatles to the end of disco or something, look at what happened. So first of all, many of the most famous and most evergreen longevity artists in that era made not only more than one album a year, some of them made 3 or 4 a year in a couple of cases. And I actually did a study of this, like an informal study. I just, did a lot of research and put it together this. And I came to the conclusion that before global touring became such a thing, what everybody did was they realized that, or their attitude was, capture the creative momentum and the youthful inertia of the artist by writing and recording as much as you can, as fast as you can, and tour as much as you can in between. And so, like Elton John, the Beatles, Zeppelin, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I mean, you look it up, and some of these people had 4 records in 12 or 18 months. And they're famous classic records. So what happened then? So I actually believe that the most creative, vital years of a creative person are from puberty to probably mid-20s. Well, 27 is lights out for a lot of it, but
yeah.
But and I think it's a combination of, if you could think back to puberty, what it felt like atomic bombs were going off inside your head, and so that you have the maximum life force. And actually, one time, a songwriter, a really great songwriter and great singer named Amy Skye, told me one time, very early in my publishing career, I had a meeting with her, and she said, "You know where great songs come from, don't you?" And I said, "No." And she said, "They come from an excess of emotion." And I thought that was a genius comment, and that's true. So when you have that maximum excess of emotion from puberty to, whenever, so you're going through this, and everything's new, it's fresh, the industry's fresh, life is fresh, your emotions are off the charts. And you're not cynical about anything, and and your craft you're building your craft on an exponential basis every month, and they all come together to you're at your most creative. And so in that golden era, they were capturing that on record and touring when they could. So you fast forward to the touring cycle that interrupted that, and I think it actually elongated and in many ways destroyed the cycle of gratification and learning that went on. My favorite example of that is a number of years ago, I had the opportunity my wife and I had dinner with Lamont Dozier and his wife. Lamont was,
one of
the Holland Dozier Holland writing production team at Motown.
Yeah.
Their most successful team. They were more successful by some metrics than the Beatles. And on Motown, in the minds of a lot of people, was the greatest record label in history. And I said to him, and this was early days of iTunes. And I talked about the now where you can be able to put records out almost soon after you write the song, and you can get this cycle of gratification and learning going. And he said, "Yeah, that was really important in Motown." And I said, "Well, how did it work?" And he said, "Well, all week long, each writing production team had a little office at the Motown building in Detroit, and you had a piano, and you spent the whole week pounding out songs. And Thursday afternoons, Berry Gordy had the quality control meeting. Now, Berry fashioned Motown, the structure of Motown after GM, because he worked on the assembly line at GM before he started Motown. And so they had a quality control part of the assembly line. So he wanted a quality control part in his assembly line. So every Thursday afternoon, all the writer producers and A&R and creative staff met in Barry's office, and each team sat at his piano and pounded out what they thought was the best song that they'd written that week. And collectively, they all decided if which one, if any, was good enough to record and release. And, typically it was one, but maybe one or two. And then Barry would decide who was going to record it. So it'd be, well, go back to Lamont Dozier. He told me the story writing Stop in the Name of Love. He was cheating on his then wife. He was telling this story in front of his now wife. And telling her he was cheating with his then wife in a motel room. He heard a pounding on the door. He got up out of bed, put it with his robe on, opened the door, and it was his wife. And she started pounding away at him, flailing her fists and hitting with her purse. And he's going, and he puts his arms up to protect himself. And he says, "Stop in the name of love." And then, like, note to self. And so, literally, he said that later that day he got to Motown, and he went running into the office late. He says, "Boys, I got a great idea for a song," and they wrote "Stop in the Name of Love." So,
amazing.
So that Thursday, that would have been the song that was picked. And Barry said, "I think the Supremes should do this song." And so the next day they start recording the song with Holland Dozier, Holland producing. And, Saturday they're overdubbing, Sunday they're mixing, and Monday it goes to the record plant, to the pressing plant. And I said, "How long was it from when you would write a song like Stop in the Name of Love to when you hear it on the radio?" He said, 3 weeks. And I said, "How important was that to this cycle of learning and gratification?" He said, "It was critical." He said, "Because we didn't know what the we're doing. So we're learning as we go. So we would all think we all thought we knew what we were doing, and the record would hit radio and it would bomb. And we'd sit there the next week trying to figure out why. Or it was sort of successful. And so next week we're in the writing room, we're going, okay, this part seemed to work really well. Let's do more of that. Right? So we have that now. And we have that now in a way that's better than ever it was, because
it's direct to consumer.
Yes. If you're an artist with a fan base and you're smart, you're testing your ideas before you finish them.
It's so fascinating. I mean, it's really unrecognizable from how it worked when we first started. But as I say, I love it. Like I don't think I've ever had a better time doing this stuff that I'm having these days. It's really a gas. Now, I wanted to ask you, because I can't keep you forever, but I did want to ask you, because I was looking at I was sort of made a list of all the things I know that you've done. You've done a lot of stuff. So, EMI, when I first knew you, I think after EMI was Olay.
Yeah.
After Olay was SOCAN. Yeah. After SOCAN was Kilometer, which is your new venture. It's not that new now. It's a few years old. Yeah. And it sort of struck me. The one thing that kind of struck me about it all was this is kind of the first time that you're running your own company, isn't it? Well, I'm a partner. How has that made it sort of different? Like that, the fact that this is your baby.
It's incredible. It's the happiest I've been in my career. And I have incredible partners, Rodney Murphy, James Freeman, and a lot of our team was the last team I put together at SOCAN. It includes Melissa Cameron Pasley. And we have a great partner in Barometer Capital that raises our money. And the beautiful thing, you hit the nail on the head. The thing that makes it so enjoyable is that I don't have to try and convince somebody above me to do something. I mean, we do it in a way. I mean, we have an investment committee, but I mean, it's not like it was, when you had a boss or whatever. And I'm fortunate that my partners we're all largely in the same wavelength, and so it's very much an instinctive, like just look at each other and kind of nod and say, yeah, this is what we should do. And, sometimes we have a disagreement, and it's fantastic because you hear everybody's viewpoint and you trust them and you trust their opinion. And we do it. And so far it's working incredibly well. I mean, we have, the best, we're just about 3 years old, and the best compliment we've received is from a current investor who, when we first pitched to him, it was very early on, and we hadn't bought any catalogs yet or really done anything other than announced ourselves. And he said, "Wow, this is all well and good, but, circle back after you've actually done something." So I don't know, somewhere like 9 months ago or whatever, we circled back to him and showed him what we've done. And in the middle, halfway through my presentation, he interrupted me. He said, "Wait a second, you guys are actually building the business you said you were going to build." And that's really what we're very, very proud of. We had a very specific vision of what we wanted to accomplish. We set out to do it, and so far it's working out incredibly well. And the funnest part, and a huge part of this initiative is not just buying catalogs, but that's a big part of it. But I said, I'm not going to go out there and start a company that just buys catalogs. We have to also develop talent.
Yep. And
not just because that's what I love doing, but I think they go hand in hand. And so far, we've seen a lot of synergy between the two things. But so that's a big part of it. So we've only been just about a year and a half into the strategy of signing writers and developing artists and writers and producers, and it's been going great. We have a 7-studio facility downtown Toronto, which is our incubator. So it's my Motown.
Yeah, no, I've heard it's great. When I come out to Toronto, I'm going to come check it out
too. And there's to your point about Mark creating a scene. There's an actual scene there, and it's a community that people seem to want to be involved in. We had a guy that came in that he signed to Cobalt Publishing in England, and he lives in Toronto part-time because he's got a child here. And a friend of mine happened to be at an event that featured a dinner, and they got sat beside him and they got talking and music, blah, blah. Oh, I have a friend who's got a publishing company in Toronto. And the guy said, Kilometer Music? And she goes, yeah, that's it. And I've been trying to get in there for a long time, So that's sort of proof that that it's working, and we have.
Well, that's gratifying, right? I mean, it's gratifying. It's got to be.
Oh yeah, and we have a no policy, and it works out great, and they're all great people and hardworking and talented. And there's 11 writers have collectively 4 billion streams. One Billboard Hot 100 #1. 4 songs on the recent Spider-Man movie. 1 song on the recent Drake record, For All the Dogs, and it just keeps on going. We're really happy about it.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes I'll have people say to me like, "You're not really a lawyer anymore, right?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not a lawyer for hire anymore, but it's one thing to do law for third parties. It's another thing to do law for your own company."
Yeah,
because when I'm doing law for my own company, I feel like I'm creating equity. I feel like I'm creating value in what I'm doing. And I mean, boy, the legal training has never been more important than in the 604 context, because, I'll do stuff and people are like, well, people don't do it like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, watch this, and I'll put a contract. Like when we got into the NFT stuff, that's a great example where all of a sudden I'm having to draft up contracts, which not only have I never done before, arguably nobody's ever done before.
Right.
Which is fun as a lawyer, because it's usually just like, it's the same producer contract. It's the same record contract. It's fun to be able to create stuff that hasn't been created before. But like during the pandemic, we had a couple of approaches from companies to buy us. A couple pretty serious ones. And, the amount of money being offered was, a lot.
Yeah.
But the problem is they always want you to stay on. It's like, okay, we're going to buy it. And then, Jonathan, you'll run it for 5 years. And I think I'd lose my mind. If we lived forever, I might be willing to try that but we don't live forever. And 5 years is a long time to have a boss when like anything, all my biggest accomplishments would never have happened if I had a bean counter looking over my shoulder.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's what you would have. 9 times out of 10, you'll be in an environment which is the antithesis of the environment that allowed you to thrive, and it becomes miserable. And
life's too short. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. So,
well, in the NFT thing, that'd be like, you're a lawyer in 1952 and the music business is just starting.
Right.
And you're making
exactly
it as
right.
you go along. So
that's right.
Are NFTs dead?
Well, number one, we don't use that phrase around here anymore. As I say around the office, we don't use the N-word here anymore, which we don't. We call them digital collectibles.
Okay.
The funny thing is, my draw to that world was never about cryptocurrency or the blockchain. Like, there's a lot of people who are committed to that almost in a political way, like banks, we're going to decentralize banking. And I didn't give a about that. Like, if you're into that, great. I'm not into that. It was always about art for me. That's it. Yeah. Like, I'm like, wow, you can combine computer animations with music. I just thought it was fascinating. Like the possibilities of what you could do with the art to me were fascinating. And so has the market softened? Oh, Yeah. But my guys were sort of top of the, food chain for that.
Very early
and they're doing great. They were smart enough to transition to other things. So like, for example, Mad Dog Jones, who used to be in Coleman Hell, right? We're doing clothing lines. Mm-hmm. We're doing physical things now, as well as still doing digital stuff. But I'm a big believer in it still. We actually just launched 604 Infinite, which is our digital collectible store. And, am I expecting to get like super rich off of that? No, but I'm committed enough to it that I want it to be there. So, for example, when we put out a new record, we'll have a digital collectible that goes with that. And if you buy the collectible, you get the vinyl. Like we're trying to figure out ways to combine stuff. But I'm a big believer in it as an art form. Mm-hmm. As an investment, all that, I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah, right.
It's just not really, it just doesn't matter to me. Michael, thank you. This has been really actually interesting.
Well, thank you. It's been fun. It's been kind of extended version of some of the talks we have on the phone. And, I think it's been fun. And I've just, I'm happy to opine someday as to why I hate you. So. Yeah.
And you know what? I'm happy some days to opine on why I hate myself. So it kind of works out well that way. All right. Well, Michael, thanks again.